Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Brockmann, and I'm the CEO and founder of eccenca. I'm extremely happy to invite you to join us to our new podcast series starting today. But why start another podcast right now? We believe this is the perfect time to start another podcast because we are at an inflection point in the development of humanity and, of course, the development of our IT. And we believe that we, as the humans, as the ones who are involved the most, should be part of this discussion. And we believe that this discussion shouldn't be just with us as the experts in IT. It should be with you, the users, who will be deeply affected by the changes that are upon us. We believe that there is really two options to choose from. There's the hyperscaler approach from the US that standardizes AI through GPT models, claiming that they will achieve general AI very soon that will supplant human decision making in pretty much every part of our life. And we believe, on the other hand, that there should be a human-centric way of AI where we as a human are in our uniqueness, in our subjectivity, in our differentiated way of looking at things are at the center of the decision making, where an AI takes this subjective perspective and integrates it into its decision process. We think that this is a driver for differentiation. This is a driver for competitiveness. And this is also the key to a life that is fulfilling for all of us. So we want to talk to you about how organizations can embrace this, how organizations can build IT strategies around human centricity, and how they can achieve differentiation and competitiveness. And we want you to be engaged. We think that the big part of this conversation will be in the comments here. So if you are like us, in favor of a human-centric AI that empowers the human rather than marginalizing it, please subscribe and comment and discuss with us how we can make sure that humanity remains in the driver's seat. I'm really excited today because we've got my co-founder, Sören, joining us. And we'll dive into how we all got together and how eccenca got started, what we were thinking, what we were doing, and what inspired us now almost 20 years ago to start working on this topic. Sören, thank you very much for joining me, and thank you very much for being my partner for now almost 20 years.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Sören, I've brought a couple of assets to make this conversation a little lighter, and I'd like to start right away with Tim Berners-Lee and the work that he was doing back in 2006. Maybe you can fill us in a little bit on what was going on in your mind, what was going on with Tim, what was going on with Chris Bitzer in Europe, while you were doing your work back then.
Yeah, so there was this semantic web movement in the research community. There was also some initial funding, I think, by the European Commission on semantic web projects, but it was a bit dominated by ontologies and reasoning and this more heavyweight stuff. So Chris and me and some others thought we need to bring a little bit more agility, developer spirit into this area. We also started a workshop series, Scripting for the Semantic Web, where we developed or showcased some lightweight tools which can be used. And Tim Berners-Lee was also part of this workshop, co-organizing it with us and joining it. And he coined these linked data principles, which I think also stressed a little bit more that to the simplicity basically of the approach of organizing data, information, and knowledge on the web. And one part of this linked data approach were also these 5-star principles. So the idea of publishing data under an open license where you get already 1 star and then incrementally, step by step, enriching it, giving it more structure, representing it in a better way, linking it with vocabularies and ontologies, and publishing it on the web so it can be reused, it can be linked to, and create value.
Yeah, if speaking of value, do you still recall why you were so excited? I mean, after all, you were a young, aspiring researcher. You just done your dissertation. You're working on your habilitation, and you're kind of committing your life and your career to developing these technologies. But what struck you about this? I mean, was there anything, in terms of value that you thought you could bring with this? What problem were you trying to solve?
Yeah, actually, the initial topic of my PhD was service engineering. How can we engineer services in a better way? And I was then looking for services. Of course, the information, the knowledge, the data about these services plays an important or crucial role. And that's how I was like investigating what kind of techniques could be used to organize this information, knowledge, data, and services are very, very heterogeneous. You have financial services, you have travel, hospitality services, mobility services. So it's a very heterogeneous world of services. On the other hand, they are extremely important for our economy. Yeah, we are service-based economies, and that's a little bit how I started to look into how we can organize this knowledge, this information in a heterogeneous information from lots of different stakeholders, service providers, and that's how I discovered the semantic web, the first semantic web standards like RDF, maybe RDF schema. I'm not sure. OWL was already around there, and I started developing a tool for authoring these kind of first initial small knowledge bases, which was called POWL, for PHP because it was
Mm,
implemented in a scripting language, PHP for creating OWL ontologies.
okay.
And since the more I delved into this domain, the more I saw how important it is to make it usable for developers, for practitioners, and not only for research in the ivory tower. And that was a little bit the starting point. And I think this aligned very much also with Tim Berners-Lee's vision that the web should not only be a web of documents, but ultimately a web of data, a web of knowledge where we can seamlessly exchange, organize, collaborate on data and knowledge.
Well, awesome. So already at that stage, you were kind of thinking about sharing data in a meaningful way, making it accessible and making data meaningfully available really already at that time. And that was really, when we got together in 2008, I think it was January when we eventually met. So a couple months after this picture, actually. What really excited me about the stuff that you were talking about that was that you were giving data context, because I was already very much aware. I came from the background of master data management, and we'd kind of coined the term of fitness for purpose. And because we knew that there was no perfect data, there was actually never going to be perfect data in any enterprise, and we tried hard for many years with some of the largest organizations in Germany to cleanse the data over and over, and monthly, weekly, daily, and never managed to have actually perfect data. And so when you came in and said, well, data is actually only meaningful in a context, and then in that context you can decide if it is fit for the purpose. That made a lot of sense to me. And when you talked about DBpedia at that stage, you were saying, yeah, we will publish data and provide context with that data so it becomes more meaningful. And as it becomes more meaningful, it will also be more useful. And then people will use it because it is so powerful to have meaningful data. And I was fully sold on that idea. You remember that maybe, but can you say a couple of words about that? Because I think you talked about your tool Powell, but then eventually you met Chris, and you guys decided to start DBpedia, right?
Yeah, it was actually like there was maybe in the beginning not so much data, semantic data, knowledge graphs or link data out there, right? So, and I had this idea. I was actually in the final phase of my PhD thesis, where I also described, for example, this methodology of agile knowledge engineering and the editor, Powell editor, I was developing. And then I had this idea, it would be nice to extract actually this information from Wikipedia, because in Wikipedia already at that time there were these fact boxes, small tables with facts about people, organizations, locations, places. And they looked a lot like RDF triples, yeah, where you have a subject, a predicate, and an object. For example, a town, then the mayor, and then the name of the mayor or the number of inhabitants, and so on. So I had this idea we should extract this information from Wikipedia and make it available according to this linked data principles and RDF. I was actually talking to a lot of people because I was writing my thesis and I wanted to focus on finishing the thesis and not on another software development project. But no one really was
Wise
interested
man.
in that. And then at one weekend, I just started, I downloaded Wikipedia dumps and I run an extraction script and we extracted from Wikipedia this huge amount of triples. And was really surprising, and something I didn't expect at the time was that they were all connected. Yeah. So in the beginning, I thought we will get a nice data set of towns, of organizations, of people, of actors, of movies. But it turns out that they were all connected. Yeah. So that actually the places were connected to people via birthday, death date, or being mayor of, or other periods in life where they spend. And that was something I was really surprised about. And in parallel, Chris Bitzer, with whom we organized this workshop series, he also started extracting some information from Wikipedia, and then we joined efforts. And Chris actually had the idea of calling it DBpedia, like the database from Wikipedia. Yeah, and then we started publishing these big dumps of RDF triples, which became one of the first large knowledge graphs. The term knowledge graph, I think at that time didn't exist yet. Yeah, and since it's also, of course, linked to so many other domains, and can be linked and provide context like places, organizations, people, which plays a big role in many different areas as well. It became the central hub of this linked data web.
This was really amazing, Sören, and it struck me, and I'm jumping through some of these pictures here, and as I said, in January 2008 we met, and you talked to me about the context and the power of data that has context, and it totally blew me away, because I thought this is exactly how we're going to organize data in the future. And this is the way we need to organize data for AI to become a reality, because the mess that we have in the enterprise right now will not work for us. It will work against us if we want AI to work for us. And that was what I was striving to build. So I was kind of crazy about these things, maybe. Um, I needed some help, and I found it in you, because you came up with this idea. And I think the development of the lot cloud, and I'm just jumping through some of these. I mean, look at how amazing this is. Only 2010, only 2 years later, we're already looking at almost 100 different data sets now being connected. To 2014, this thing is getting out of control. And if we're looking now at today, we can actually tell how many sources are connected here. We, it
Yeah.
is just amazing what it did on the web, what it did for the web. And now the big question was, of course, okay, when is this going to move from the web back into the enterprise? Because I think one of the first things that we talked about was that I said, the internet looks big to you, but if I look at my customer Volkswagen, and if I look at the number of data sources we have in Volkswagen, it's 5,000 different systems that we're talking about. So, in 5,000 systems, if you look at this, is still more than what we have in the linked open data cloud right now. And so enterprises have that exact same problem that we're addressing here at the on the internet. And I was always convinced that if this works on the internet, that people would feel compelled to adhere to some of these standards, apply these technologies, and get value from you know publishing their own data in RDF, and by doing so being able to connect to other people's data and then get more accessibility, more meaning,
Yep.
and faster decisions. I thought this would be logical and obvious that this would also be the way forward in the enterprise. But it did take some time, right?
Yep.
Um,
Before we go into that, may I
Mhm.
share also another
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
anecdote?
Thank you.
Once we extracted this information from Wikipedia, the first version, there was
Mhm.
actually a conference, the European Semantic Web Conference. Now it's called Extended Semantic Web Conference, one of
Mhm.
the top conferences in the area. And I wanted to submit a paper there. I also asked Jens Lehmann, who already started as
Mhm.
a PhD student of mine at the time, and we wrote a paper about our first extraction from Wikipedia. And since the conference was taking place in Innsbruck, and we were in Leipzig, starting the IKSW research group there, we were asking us what have Innsbruck and Leipzig in common. And that actually became the title of our paper, because with Wikipedia and the extracted DBpedia, we could actually follow or investigate links between different resources and entities. And we found out, we built actually also a small tool like a relationship finder. And we found out that both Innsbruck and Leipzig have a common twin town, which is Krakow in Poland. So this was one of
Very
the links
cool.
between the two towns.
Yeah.
There are many
Mhm.
more via more hops. This is just
Mhm.
one hop.
Mhm.
And that was the title of the first
Mhm.
paper about this DBpedia extraction. And I think it really showed also what you just mentioned, the
Mhm.
context, the linking between different things, and making this transparent and much revealing it, making it much more visible. And I think this is something we also observe now increasingly in the enterprise world, with supply chain data, with product data, which needs to be connected between also different entities and companies, organizations there.
Obviously, I mean, in pharma, there is a lot of work around graph data science, of course, where these kind of connections play a big role in identifying potential drug candidates or compounds, etc. So that's a very, very exciting field. And yeah, I was going to move away from the lot cloud now and move to the fair data principles, because I think these are also key elements of the journey, I guess, from your initial idea, of turning Wikipedia from a document centric view to a data centric view by turning it into DBpedia, then publishing it with RDF on the web, etc., following the 5-star principles. And now, how can I adopt this on the enterprise level? And now we're seeing, of course, a lot of enterprises adopting something that's called the fair data principles: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, which effectively is applying to the enterprise what you were trying to do on the web in the first place, right? Making just data more accessible and reusable on the web scale. But this is becoming more and more and more a subject on enterprise level, and in effect, is particularly in the pharma industry. We're now seeing almost all large pharma organizations looking to build their own fair data strategy. It's quite amazing, Sören, what you've done. When was the first time that you became aware of the fair principles? Were you involved in that as well, or is that the work of somebody else?
No, I was not directly involved in that. I actually was a bit not such a big fan in the beginning, because my impression was that the linked data principles say it all. Yeah, you can realize the fair principles following the linked data principles and the standards of W3C. So for me, in the beginning, it was way too vague and too conceptual. I think meanwhile, it's also linked to these kind of standards and metadata standards and linked data principles and so on. And of course, meanwhile, I also understood that it's maybe good to have such a conceptual framework which convinces people, and then there's the implementation side. And I think meanwhile, it's very well accepted that you use the semantic web standards, for example, for implementing these FAIR principles.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a good point to make, and I guess that's what we do at Essenza, right? We basically apply the semantic web standards to enterprise data and try to re-implement basically the journey that you took with DBpedia on the web for some of the biggest enterprises in the world. But taking a step back, because we're not talking about what we do today, we are looking at what I did, trying to convince you, because many people don't know this, and I don't know if you remember this. Then when I talked to you in 2008 and said, this is this is a game changer. It will create the ability to build a data operating system that follows a totally different paradigm, and it will be a game changer for the enterprise. Let's start a company. What were your thoughts back then? I recall that there were some doubts. If I'm quite honest about it, I think it took some time to convince you.
No, I was actually always interested also to bring this to also industrial applications. So from that perspective, I think it was great that we met and that you shared this vision of linked data and semantic web and knowledge graphs. And I think I was also quite interested. And I remember the first projects we were working on together, like small projects on trying this out. And I was always convinced that it's really required that we bring this really to the industry, to industrial applications, and it cannot just stay in the research circles. So from that perspective, was really perfect match between us.
Mhm. Yeah, I still remember very well. I think one of the first who gave us a chance to actually build something in an enterprise context was T-Online back then with Arne Kunisch.
Yep.
And we built a little bit of a T-Online DBpedia as an enhancement for their search engine disambiguation, but also giving context to queries that were sent by the user. I think that was a big milestone for us. Actually, I think that those were the first people who gave us money. And then another person, of course, Igor Drusevich and Michael Goritz at Mercedes-Benz, who gave us money to, I don't know, this is also more than 10 years ago. And I'm very grateful to these people because they gave us an opportunity to share this technology with them, evolve it, learn. And I don't know if you remember this, but I remember this very well because you talked about PHP. I don't know if you remember the anecdote when we first arrived at Mercedes-Benz with PHP software, and they basically sent us home and said, "Okay, come back when you can do this in Java."
Yeah, I
Was a bit
remember
of
this
a hiccup.
very well. That didn't fulfill the industrial grade criteria at the time. Although PHP was, for example, Yahoo, I think, was completely
Yeah.
built on PHP. Yeah, so there were big companies using this
Mhm.
technology,
Mhm.
but others were a bit skeptic.
Yeah, but it's never a straight line, right? When you build an enterprise, or you have this vision. I mean, there's setbacks, and this was certainly a 2-year setback, probably for us, because we basically had to reinvent the software that you'd already built. What was it called? Onto Wiki or something? What was it
Yep,
called?
exactly. Yeah.
Onto Wiki. So we had to go back to the drawing board also for the whole team, to start delving into the Java development space. And of course, Sebi and the rest of the team, did amazing work and ended up coming out of the tunnel. And the Mercedes-Benz guys eventually let us in. And if I may recall yet another anecdote with Mercedes-Benz, because when we deployed there, of course, I don't know if you remember this. We had we had SUSE Linux, I don't know, 13 or something that we were developing on, and they had a specifically hardened version of SUSE Linux that was like version 9. So I think we sent a colleague called Jörg to Mercedes, and he had a nice USB stick with him, thumb drive, right? And he thought, well, okay, no problem. I'll put the thumb drive into the server here in Mercedes data center, and then I'll hook up the machine to the internet. We'll just download the missing classes. Okay, I think they stoned this guy. I still don't know if he's still allowed to come back to Stuttgart even, because of course for security reasons that is an absolute no-go. But we had absolutely no clue how to interact with enterprise clients and what their expectations were. And we must be so grateful for their patience, and the opportunity they gave us to learn with them, in building this. And of course, eventually we did get it to run, even though it was a learning experience, a hard one. And thank you to Mercedes. I think the next one, and I don't know if there's anything that you remember from the time that you'd like to mention, but I think one other client that really was very patient and very helpful was Bosch. I don't know if you remember this, and we worked with Bosch Power Tools for quite some time. And of course, deploying our software in that environment, again, really gave us a lot of fits. And it also taught us, and kind of for a sensor, I think, it's one thing to have a big vision, about what to do with the data, but actually running a knowledge graph, a large scale knowledge graph in the context of a large organization like Bosch, in the security requirements, that they provide, the multi-environment setting also, multi-cloud integration, etc. So eventually, I mean, what we learned with these clients is it's not only about building a knowledge graph, it's actually about how to run and maintaining it in the context of the constraints of these large organizations. It's almost like, the iceberg kind of thing. We thought we have the little iceberg, we know what we need to do to make this work, but actually learning what it meant to do this for an enterprise, within an enterprise, in the security context that they provided, I mean, that at least required another year or two for us of learning. And again, thank you very much to Bosch, Christian Hütter, namely, Annette Becker, I think, who was our sponsor back then. Thank you for the patience, help us build this. I think we built something very beautiful together with them, but that was really amazing. Yeah, is there anything else that you can remember from the days, that should be part of this very first podcast? I mean, if a lot of emotional things that I can think of course, between us. Of course, thank you very much for your patience, because it
I can
quite a
share
while.
another
Yeah,
anecdote.
yeah.
In addition to this first industrial projects which we had, which you now mentioned and explained, we of course also were starting to work on research projects, and a bit funded collaborative research projects. I think that's actually a nice instrument, that there are these Ministry of Education and Research at the time. Now they're called for technology, research, and space. That they fund these collaborative projects with industry. And one of our first projects, I don't know if it was SoftWiki, whether Essenza was involved there, or one of the later ones. And I remember we just had started the company and was part of the project, but we didn't have an office yet. And I put actually Essenza's name on my mailbox in my private address.
Oh,
And at
that's
some
true.
point, I met the
Oh,
representatives
that's
from
true.
BMBF, how they were standing in front of my door, looking for the mailbox and wondering. So in the very beginning, we didn't start in a garage, but basically with the mailbox of my apartment at the time. But then quickly we had rented some offices. I think it was also together with Infi, the institute, and now, of course, Essenza is housed in one of the oldest living house in Leipzig, in Heinstraße, with the amazing
Yeah.
ceilings from the Middle Ages.
Yeah,
There is even a Wikipedia page. I guess it's also in DBpedia,
Mhm.
Heinstraße 8.
I surely expect you to make sure that it will be in DBpedia, at least from now on. Yeah, I guess that. I mean, it was a rocky start for sure, and I mean we are fully bootstrapped till today. So obviously, it's not always been an easy ride for us. But I think the thing is that we also, and I really thank you for that, because you've always had this wonderful tone and spirit of collaboration with your scientist friends, I guess, and colleagues at the university. And I think it really carried over to building a team spirit at Essenza that is really amazing. And if you think about the very, very little amount of churn that we have in the team, I mean, pretty much everybody has been with us since the beginning, it feels like, right? And I think that that's also due to the way you set up the people that you brought in from your team, and the spirit that you actually created for the team. Thank you for that. But I think it also came down to values. right? And I think, yeah, I must say, obviously I was a Vessi, the capitalist Vessi, who just seen to be the one who just wanted to make a lot of money quickly, right? But actually, I think maybe I was able to prove to you guys it's not about the money. I really want to make this work, and I think we have a wonderful team now and a spirit, that's all about people seeing a vision for the future of working with data and building a platform for AI, and actually maybe creating a new way of how we interact with the computer. And I think there's so um, many things that could get better, right? I mean, honestly, just to say a few words about how I got started in all this, because I always thought we just use the computer as a typewriter. I wasn't really seeing the computer as a way that augments me. And I was seeing company functioning despite the IT systems that they put in place. People working around and I'm not naming three-letter companies, that are biggest part of the problem, but people working around the type of IT that they have. And I think at Essenza, we have a very strong shared spirit that we can build something where computers can actually start augmenting us and become an extension to humans in the workplace, to be better than we could ever be alone. And I think there is something in it, that for us that can really make a big impact on humanity. And I think I think that's really what gets every one of us to go to work every morning. I think, it's important to get a paycheck. But I think for all of us, I think it's really all about, very much about, being part of this thing, and that can change everything for humanity in this sense. And yeah, I think it's great to come back in a conversation with you to see, how you got started. and and I thought that you already overwhelmed me with the vision. Maybe you hadn't even thought it through all the way. I mean, it sounded like it. You were just trying to
No,
get your presentation.
one aspect which I didn't anticipate was, of course, also the rise on these new AI models, large language models. But I think it also showed that they actually need access to data, to knowledge. They cannot function alone. Alone, they will be just stochastic parrots. But once you give them access to data sets, to knowledge graphs, to this contextual information, then we can really realize a vision where we have more automation and more efficiency, where we humans can focus maybe more on the interesting parts, and all the heavy lifting is done by such a kind of newer symbolic AI or agentic AI, where these knowledge graphs and semantic technologies play in collaboration with these AI models and language models. And that's something which evolved a little bit in the vision. In the beginning, we were very much hooked to this linked data and knowledge graphs, and now it's I think we have this combination of integrating also this neural AI into the picture, which became now much more plausible and usable.
Well, absolutely, Søren. I think we'll have to have you back, because we need to talk about that, of course. What's ahead of us? What are we working on right now? What are we seeing? How we seeing this technology align? Augment. I think there's really a path forward. That's very, very synergetic between other forms of AI, and this. I think this is a big thing that we need to learn and others need to learn as well. It's not about, if you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I think it's the future of AI will be hybrid in one way or the other. And I think the linked data community and of course the RDF semantics and symbolic AI community has something to add that's really valuable. And I'm really, really looking forward to invite you back to talk about that in one of the next podcasts. I think we'll have to wrap it up right now. We are already 30 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Thank you, Sören, for joining me to build this company. I think we've come a long way, and thank you for inspiring me and the whole team and so many others on this journey. Yeah, and let's talk soon.
Yeah, it was a great pleasure. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sören.